Hi, welcome to Trekkie and Beyond, a Star Trek podcast. I'm Moneca.
I'm Nick.
Today we are covering
All right.
our mid-season reactions of Star Trek Prodigy Season 1. Okay, let's dive in. What were your initial reactions, Nick?
My initial reactions, I really like the wonderful expansion of the narrative that was shown throughout the first episodes after they escaped Taros Lamora. Also Murph is really amazing. I really like Murph.
In my opinion, the series is just getting better and better and better. Here, I feel as though adulting is not easy. And they're realizing that now they had to make a lot more decisions and work in different ways that they didn't have to before. And that it's not predictable. There's a lot more conflict. And that's what's drawing me further into this series. It's so much better than the first two episodes. I agree with you there, Nick. So it's really taken off. And the music is much better now. Let's briefly talk about the characters and then we'll talk about each episode one at a time. Any characters stand out?
Okay. The character that stood out to me the most is Rock Talk. I used to not like her because of the whole big body, high pitched voice thing, but she is definitely growing on me in terms of the character that she is. She took a lot of initiative in episode 8, and I can understand where she's coming from.
I agree. I like how her characters are evolving, but I really like how I have fell out of love with Dao and then fallen back in love with Dao. So I would dive into that first because I had
Yeah.
issues when he called Janeway Hello Nanny. And I was like, oh no, you didn't. And so it was a roller coaster of emotions for me because he came off arrogant. He was like leaping first and then thinking, and he wasn't taking in the advice of his peers, his friends, the only people he have in the world right now. He wasn't listening to them.
Yeah.
And in the end, though, I think around episodes 8, 9, and 10, he learned to listen more, and that he was like really too big for his britches. And being this captain is a lot of responsibility, and so he had to step up more.
He definitely did, mature at least a little bit from the time that he escaped Tarzan to the time that he came back. I honestly agree with you on that. And especially episodes 4, 5, and 6, Dao was just sort of being so arrogant and so like power driven, despite the fact that, he didn't really have any extra power over everybody. They were just kind of like, oh yeah, you're the captain, huh?
I
Yeah.
do want to mention, or really give an honorable mention to Murph and the cat, Caitlin, because they were wonderful. They were a breath of fresh air here.
Yeah.
And it goes to show, those quiet ones, they come out and save the day.
Actually, speaking more on Murph, before we move on to that, I would like to say Murph is probably one of the most useful characters on the crew at this point in time. Even though Murph can't speak as of now, they contain the entire protocore. Like they're so useful right now. They've gotten the characters out of so many binds at this point. It's actually crazy.
I really love Murph, but this is we might have to agree to disagree on this one. But I think that Fugitive Zero, he's the most valuable of all of them because he has the Navy protostar. So
Mm, yeah.
and he's one of the treasures that saved the day in the very end in episode 10. So let's just dive into the
Oh
episodes
yeah.
and take them piece by piece.
So episode Starstruck, takes place directly after they escape Tars Lamora. And this was the first episode that really kind of made Dow a little off for me when he first was starting this whole captain thing. Because he's over there, he's in the ship, talking about I'm the captain, and the captain is, will you listen to the captain? And he's just like super prideful the whole episode, not listening to whatever anybody has to say. And then he leads them into like this dying star almost. And they have to try and escape it before the entire ship blows up. Even though I was really liking Dow the first 2 episodes, it kind of changed for me a little bit.
What we're going through here is the fact that Dao was never really tested in this way. And so he's like a fish out of water. It's a lot different from going from a case in which for all your life you have to take orders from one and you dream about that leadership role to then having that responsibility, but not having training, education to know how to formally lead. So he was able to
Yeah.
lead this revolt, but he's not able to maintain order and leadership. So there's a lot of issues there. But Janeway's there to help. She introduces them to the Federation. They lie. Really, not they. Dao lies and says
Yeah,
that they
everyone does
are cadets, but the rest of the team doesn't formally disagree and object. So this really becomes the first stress test of Dao and the crew leading a ship in this
Yeah.
technology, this power.
It also leaves you wondering how that's going to develop with Janeway as well, because eventually she will find out. She
Of
does
course.
find out that they're lying.
Right. You can only hold this for so long. It's quite obvious. If she was real,
Yeah.
if she was a real person,
Yeah.
what IRL, then they would understand. But because it's a hologram, I think she's just taking the benefit of the doubt.
It does teach you a lot about pride, how it can be a double-edged sword. If you don't want to give in, listen to any constructive criticism, you might end up hurting yourself or others. So definitely be wary about that.
Yes. Okay, episode 4, Dreamcatcher. And I feel like this is their first away mission. There's a planet that they find that needs further exploration, according to Janeway. Otherwise, they're violating Federation policy. So they explore the planet only to find out that the planet analyzes their subconscious to learn about their hopes and fears and tries to use that against them so that the planet can basically eat them. Is that an adequate summary? I feel like
It leaves you wondering why the planet exactly needs to eat them. I mean, you would think that such small organisms like they are wouldn't really serve a planet any use for energy, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, and we also find out that there's other life forms that have visited, like Klingons, that wasn't able to survive the mission. So the planet's been eating sparsely for a while as people try to explore, and then aren't able to be a team so that they can to leave the planet.
Yeah. Also, we see Dao. Well, this is the first instance of us seeing anything that has to do with Dao's past, and we learn from this at least that Dao doesn't even know what his parents look like all the way. I mean, he imagines that they look like him. He can't picture her face. So it's just it's really kind of an upsetting episode because we see all the characters get what they want. Like Gwen sees the diviner actually, be proud of her for once. But so yeah, everybody gets to see what they want. It just turns out to be too good to be true, and it just ends up like really sad at the end.
Yeah, I think it's not just about seeing they see what they're hopeful for. Like in Rocktock's case,
Yeah,
she wants to be loved. So she
yeah,
sees innocent love, like puppy love. And that then completely distracts them from the original mission that Janeway gave them, and they were only supposed to focus on for an hour was to get these samples and to report back. And instead, they became self-absorbed, then needed individual like prison breaks from their own subconscious.
yeah. It shows real mental fortitude for each of the characters, considering it probably took a lot to break themselves out of those imaginary situations, even if some of them had to be woken up.
Yes. Yeah. For me, it also showed like the level of psychological analysis possibly the writers had to do to go to take these characters who were prisoners on the planet and then to look at each of those characters differently and then start to present subtly to us some backstory by communicating their hopes and fears.
Yeah.
Also in this is where I get more into my issues with Dao and his immaturity, the fact that he went rogue, and then the rest of the crew went rogue because he went rogue. He started off going off into a different direction and didn't share that vehicle, that four-wheel vehicle with them. So then I feel like it did eroded the teamwork that they were just starting to develop in the previous few previous few episodes. Oh, and we forgot to mention that Fugitive Zero was self-absorbed into a puzzle.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Murph and Janeway stayed on the ship.
It wouldn't have been kind of fun to see what Murph's desires were if they ended up on the planet.
Yeah,
Probably would have just been eating
I was
something.
thinking that too. And also, like, Janeway stated that Murph was there to keep her company, but it's hard for Murph to communicate. And then, how can Murph really protect you? And Murph wasn't able to protect Janeway from the vines and roots that were growing around the ship.
Yeah, Murph was just kind of there. It's actually crazy how useful Murph becomes as the series went on,
Yes.
though.
And speaking of Vines and Murph, the episode ends sort of like a to be continued to the next episode with episode 5, Terra Firma, in which our crew is trying to find their way back to the ship. And then they realize that, oh, this planet keeps like shape shifting and mountains are moving. So the destination is just as far away as when they started.
And this episode presented yet another instance of Dow's kind of immature nature during the time when, even though, yeah, it was Gwen's fault that the entire crew ended up getting trapped on the planet for like an entire day. Then when she takes the initiative and saves them from this big like creature robot thing, he still doesn't even like acknowledge her at all. He's just kind of like, oh well, you're the one who got us into this situation anyway. So yeah, I don't know why they're thanking you. No, it was just kind of off for me. But I did like to see how throughout this episode.
Yeah, I think it was around episodes 4 and 5 we realized that Gwen also had a lot of hidden talents. And I wouldn't say it was purposely hidden. We just learned more about her and her hair heirloom. She can reprogram things and everything. Because I feel as though Dao is the one to really get them into this situation. And that really goes back to episode 3 because Dao released all the auxiliary power to areas, and then that released Gwen from the brig.
He's kind of been leading his own crew into turmoil multiple times at this point. Now for episode 6, Kobayashi. This whole episode, it introduces this sort of training program for new captains of the Protostar, which presents them with a lose-lose scenario, basically, where no matter what they do, there will always be something else that comes into the simulation that ends up wiping out their entire squad, and perhaps even their all of Starfleet. This is where we really see Dow's character begin to grow more on just a kind of immature kid. He starts to learn actual leadership skills. He starts to learn how to listen to his other crewmates instead of just doing his own thing. Because as he sees in the probably like 70, 80 times he tries to replay the simulation, every time he just goes about doing things in some wild manner, he just ends up getting his whole crew destroyed again. It really shows Dow's leadership. We also get to see a look into the original crew of the Protostar before it ended up in Tars Lamora.
Yes. So a little backstory. In the Starfleet Academy, they train cadets for lots of different scenarios. And so some of these scenarios, as you stated, have really a no win. And that's really life. In life, there's sometimes you're working out plans and you have to decide what's the best of two evils. There's many different times you could try to implement something in. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. And that's the whole problem with like Back to the Future and some other things. Is like, even if you try to go back in time to change something, there's ripple effects that has other ripple effects that may not be positive, may not be good. The writers seem to move with intention in this episode to integrate other Star Trek characters. They mentioned who would be the best crew for this mission. They mentioned J.T. Kirk for captain, and Dow said, "Oh no, I'm going to be the captain of this ship." And so that could have been an opportunity for Dow to learn how another captain would make decisions in these scenarios. But no, Dow's thinking, "Nope, I'm going to do this." I don't know, like 100 times.
After I finally found out that it was a lose-lose scenario, I would have came back to it and been like, "Hey, okay, so let's see how anybody else handles this." And I feel like that's just nature for someone to do that. It's kind of confusing why he didn't do
But
that,
not for
actually.
know-it-alls, for people that
Yeah.
think they know it all. And
Yeah.
ones individuals that are not comfortable asking for help. And the computer was
Yeah.
available to also ask for help. And there were several other resources. Could notice he didn't engage the best crew, according to the computer, to help solve this problem. Now, in my opinion, this wasn't the best crew, but I can follow along with the writers here. I like the fact that they included Spock and Ahura. Not quite sure that Scotty is like the best engineer. So many of these characters are beloved in the franchise.
I believe the writers honestly did that to mostly just pay tribute to the actors. Because yeah, I saw at the end credits they said in memory of, and then named off each of these actors. So
yes,
yeah.
because it was I was wondering how they integrated the actors' voices that for the actors that passed away. They used previous episodes in Star Trek and then brought over those audio snippets into Prodigy. I do want to mention, because the post credits did not include Nichelle Nichols, who played Ahura. She passed away. She should be also highly remembered for her role there as our number one communicator. I think he called her the earpiece lady. Okay, but in this, we're also introduced to the holodeck, which allows for training programs and other types of simulations. Sometimes in Star Trek, they just go there to have fun and to vent, daydream, go there to work out. So it could be a fun place, not just a workplace. There's a mysterious history to the protostar.
I believe in the last moments of the episode, we see this sort of security footage of what transpired before the protostar gets taken over, and we just see a glimpse of what looks like one of the dreadnought robots. We still don't really know how that took place. All we know is they have history.
Yes, I'm sure we'll find out.
Okay.
Okay, episode 7, First Con-tact. So, in this episode, we are entangled in a like a side quest from someone from Dow's past wants a favor. And we learned that you can't always trust people from your past, or people that you think have good intentions sometimes do not. We learn a lot more about Dow's past and the fact that he was sold to the diviner by Nadi, this character that is a Ferengi and is really up to no good.
Yeah, she claims that she has a bunch of gambling debt, hence why she wanted to get this sort of crystal to make a diplomatic exchange with this kind of non-corporeal race. Yeah, she just leads to she not only does she end up stealing the cloaking device from the crew, but then she also ends up stealing the crystal, but they end up getting it back and then putting it back in the like area where the race kind of meets together and they play like a little song for them. She kind of steals it from them, then they get mad, but then they return it, but they still kind of have a mistrust for anybody who comes back to the planet. I don't know. She just creates so much conflict for the crew in this episode. and really, it even ends up making Janeway mad at them for the first time ever.
So that's when Jamie really started to put her foot down. We're introduced to
Yeah.
transporters and beaming, which is a technology that has a lot of benefits. And poor Murph becomes a guinea pig as they try to learn about the technology and beam Murph around. It's cute as they're discovering the technology here.
Yeah. Oh, this episode really gives us some insight on how the unwanteds, as the diviner calls them, how they ended up on the planet. I mean, just the name unwanteds kind of gives you a little hint on how they got on Tars Lamora to begin with. But it seems like all of them were sent there either from getting sold, or maybe they were trafficked onto that island, or maybe they got in trouble with some sort of law firm, and instead of going to prison, they got sent to that island. So everybody who's on Tars Lamora probably had some sort of troubled past that ended up getting them on that island. Not like a punishment for prisoners, like the diviner tried to lie to Gwen about. They got into some sort of trouble to end up on there.
Yeah, it was definitely not their choice. It was not free will. And we could tell that also
Yeah.
with the cat in the very beginning, Caitlin, and how she was sold into child slavery to work in the mines. I'm glad you mentioned
Yeah.
that. I feel as though there's different jargon being used for the individuals on the colony. Sometimes they're called the unwanted, and it all depends on the perspective, really, of the person that's
Yeah.
communicating. Yes, sometimes they're called the unwanted. Sometimes they're called miners, as in they
Yeah.
were mining for the mineral. Sometimes they're called orphans, but really they were enslaved there.
Uh when they mention the diviner, sometimes they call him the diviner, or sometimes they call him our diviner, which leads me to believe that maybe diviner isn't his name, but rather possibly a role
Mhm.
that is taken on in the
Mhm.
series. Like our diviner, maybe maybe a diviner in the Star Trek universe is just anybody who rolls over some sort of prison colony, or maybe it's a certain role in an empire.
Or king. It could be like some sort of title for a ruler of a colony. As
Yeah.
and earlier in our last recording, you mentioned prison warden. It could be something like that, but on a grander scale, because we learn that the diviner
Yeah.
has a much bigger plan. And
Yeah.
I was wondering
Yeah.
what's the loot that the pirates are after, the space pirates are after. And then let's dive into episode 8, Time Amok.
Yeah, the episode starts with the crew sort of, I'd say they were sort of at odds after this, and Janeway tries to bring them together again with a like training exercise. They kind of get in this sort of explosion of some sort. I think it was like some sort of star kind of fluctuating, which happens a lot in the series somehow for some reason. The star like sort of fluctuates and then messes with the protostar that's in the protostar, and it creates this sort of time temporal uh difference for each of the characters on the ship, causing some to be stuck in really, really fast time and some to be stuck in incredibly, incredibly slow time. Like Pog almost dies instantly in this explosion that happens. And then Rock Talk is just stuck in like incredibly slow time where a minute probably goes by in like a month or two.
Yeah, so all of the characters seem to grow except for Murph. And
Yeah.
so, but I don't think Murph was truly tested. I just want to say that for the benefit of Murph.
Yeah, Janeway just kind of slipped down on Murph. Murph had like the second slowest time, and Janeway just like, oh yeah, I'm not dealing with this. Just blip to the next one.
But Murph is indestructible. So really is time an issue? Like, shouldn't Murph have been available just like I guess re-pop up in each of the time? lapses because it's
Yeah,
just
I guess since Murph can contain a star. Yeah.
I don't know. I would have counted
Well,
out Murph so easily. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, well, all the characters had to overcome some mental obstacle because many of them thought that they couldn't solve the problem, but basically they were able to like daisy chain the problem to get solved. So one person would start solving a problem, and then they pass a clue to another person in another timeline to solve it, and then pass it, and then pass it. But then at Gwen, it was kind of like a reset, but at least she saved like a journal entry so
yeah.
that poor Rock just had to like create it all again from scratch, but not know how to implement it. And the whole time I was thinking to both Gwen and to Rock, ask the computer. Ask the computer where the coupler, how to
Yeah,
find a
yeah.
coupler, or where to put.
And
Go
you
to
would
the
think that in
hologram
like the
deck
months
or
of
go to the
time.
simulation.
Yeah, you would think in months of time after that, Rock Talk would have enough time to at least find where the issue was. I mean, the ship is only so big.
At least Rock kept herself busy and learned, and it didn't all fail with her. She seemed to gain the most knowledge from the whole thing.
She's probably like mentally older at this point, considering how long she was probably in there for.
Yes, and now able to serve in many different capacities on the ship, not just in security, not just thought of as the muscle.
And she's probably a better engineer than Pog at this point.
Yeah, I think she's a much more modern engineer because she's more book smart. Welcome back to Trekkie and Beyond, a Star Trek podcast. And this half of the episode, we will talk about episodes 9 and 10 of season 1 of Star Trek Prodigy. The episode starts out with this opening scene that was actually quite scary. And we hear, "Come back to me. Come back to me." And it was the face of the diviner speaking, and as Pog put it, a haunted head to try to convince Gwen to turn on her friends and reunite with the diviner. It's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. I know he's trying to hypnotize you, but don't cave. That was a spooky moment. I thought it was like the darkest scene.
Yeah, especially the dilemma he presented them with. That's
Yes.
very dark for a kid show, honestly. If you keep running, I'm gonna kill everybody else, or come back and then surrender. Basically, your only way to escape. It was
So, should they go to the Federation? Should they return to Tars Lamora? What would you do if you were Dow?
If I was down, I honestly would have made the other decision to go to the Federation because I would assume that since, the Federation has a ship,
Yeah.
with that's powered by a protostar, I would just assume that they would have had other ships that have protostars that can just make a jump right back to Tars Lamora, considering, the protostar is just a lost piece of technology from the Federation. So I personally would have jumped there, asked for their help, hopefully have gotten it, then jump to Tars Lamora with an entire federation to back me up.
Yes, so would I. And I would have done that at episode 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have claimed refugee status. Help, help, help. SOS. We need help. And we got some friends back there too that need help. Please save us.
Yeah. Instead of this big old adventure side quest and then lying spree that they kind of went on.
Right, because they kept just, I feel like, digging themselves into a deeper and deeper hole, and you know that the diviner has those soldiers, those little, what are they called, the watchers. So
Yeah.
there's lots of watchers. You know that he's smart, super smart. He's gotten to where he's at because he has high-end negotiation skills and power and influence and stuff like that. Like, you're a peon compared to the level of power and
Yeah.
influence that he has.
And that was a really good point mentioning how you would do that in episode 3. They really should have just done that first off. That would have saved so much time for everyone.
And that's what Janeway was trying to convince him to do.
At
But
least they got it done eventually, but not without serious injuries, probably.
right. And then he could officially apply for the Starfleet Academy at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of just, like, basically stealing their property and then going on a long adventure on a joyride, basically.
But we're along for the ride, and
Yeah.
and Dow develops some courage and decides he's going to make a plan. He seems more inclusive of the rest of the team this time, and embracing everyone's talents into this, including Murph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Murph actually ended up being incredibly useful, containing the protostar in a decoy body of
We
Zero.
also realized that all the scenes where Murph was like randomly eating stuff, I think it was helping us to understand the fact that he could eat big things and like survive if there was a big explosion. And so Murph's body must have like tons of layers of protection in that.
Yeah.
And so he consumed the protostar.
Somehow, that's so strange. Like, not even he didn't even, like, consume the thing that was holding the protostar, he just straight up ate the star, like, the actual star.
Right. And good thing that was off screen so it was more believable. But
Yeah,
after I guess they jumped to Tars Lamar and then they slowed down, that's when Murph ate it because it couldn't have ate the protostar before they left or while they were in space because they needed that to travel.
yeah.
Whew.
Which I guess it makes sense considering every time they used the, protostar's jumping ability, like, with the fastest version, it seems that the star loses most of its energy and it has to build back up.
Right.
So that must have been the time that Murph ate it when it was like the lowest of energy that it was at, and then it just consumed it real quick while it was still super unusable.
That's a really good point. I was thinking as the crew was disembarking off of the ship that the diviner would have asked not only for Gwen, but also for Fugitive Zero, because our initial hunt was for Fugitive Zero. So I was like,
Yeah,
oh my goodness. And this was before I knew exactly what was going on with Murph. But
yeah,
if the diviner had also negotiated and asked for Fugitive Zero and found out that Fugitive Zero was like a decoy, then
yeah,
all of this stuff would have not ended the way it did.
yeah. It would have fallen apart.
But along the way, we also met evil hologram Janeway once a diviner took control of the protostar ship.
Yeah,
Good thing Gwen had foresight into that
yeah.
and knew that her father was going to try to outwit the
To
team.
be honest, it did seem kind of expected, especially since the diviner was willing to do basically anything to get that ship, even betray his own daughter for that. So this wasn't completely unforeseen, this dilemma that he presented to begin with.
But Dal and the crew didn't think that the diviner would take out the generator and the power source for Tars Lamar, therefore making it harder for them to try to communicate and gather all of the miners and individuals on the planet. But yeah, of course he's going to double cross you and find some other way of taking you down because why would he want to give you what he just
Yeah.
built up?
Yeah, man is a villain,
Yeah, because
but
there's
he had a good cause, I
yeah,
guess.
because there's still mining that could be developed there.
'Cause the more that I look at it, the more like fully man-made the planet seems. Like I know there's stuff that they're mining, but I feel like the majority of the planet at this point has been turned into some sort of ship. I mean, the entire thing has a cloaking device around it. It it can almost basically move on its own at this point. I mean, that like ship that the diviner owns is probably like 30% of the planet. So
He developed that cloaking device because what he was doing was unlawful. So he was hiding it,
yeah,
hiding all of the activities in
hiding from the
plain sight.
Federation.
We also saw something I want to mention was this mind meld between Gwen and the Diviner. And during that scene, the Diviner was able to basically find out by reading Gwen's brain or subconscious that she was hiding something, and he's not used to getting sensing that.
Yeah,
This mind meld is a type of communication that we see probably in almost all of the series at some point, in which there's a communication by um, sharing the each other's subconscious. And so it's interesting that there not only is there's this father daughter bond there, but also there's possibly this bond between their species. I wonder if everyone in their species can do this mind meld, or if this is just something that they're able to do and they've been doing for a while.
hmm. It seems like a very common trait between a lot of different races in Star Trek, ability to read minds.
Right. And mind melding is also more than just like reading your current thoughts. It can
Yeah,
also take you back to someone else, to their previous moments, their memories.
yeah,
Um, so, and usually that is a very intense process, because to take on your memories and then someone else's memories is just a whole other like level of pressure and stress, and a whole lot more in your mind.
yeah,
But it was cool to see that cultural aspect. It was also very interesting to see what's the name of is it Sloan, the planet that the diviner is from, and to see that landscape, and it looks like very interesting technology.
he wanted to convert the protostar into a weapon using the star that was on the ship, and he wanted to get into the Federation and blow them up from the inside out before they had the chance to start that civil war on his home planet. So yeah, the race is still alive as of now. He just was trying to get them to he was trying to get the protostar to stop them from destroying the planet.
Oh, so this is actually more like Back to the Future than I thought.
Yeah.
It sounds as though also he planted some sort of bug. I'm just gonna, because we don't know yet,
Yeah.
or that may go, in which some sort of trouble is going to happen when the protostar ship returns to the Federation.
Yeah.
And that made me think of like a Trojan horse, in which like you think it's this nice innocent gift thing, and then it's evil destruction inside. So we'll see how this unfolds once again. Fortunately, Gwen doesn't remember this conversation at the
Yeah.
end of episode 10, so she's not able to warn them fully of what could transpire.
Yeah.
But then it also makes me think, well, then I'm glad they did not go to the Federation earlier, as I
Yeah, because
previously
then it would
wanted
have
them
just
to do, because then could cause much worse and they not even know it. But I guess we'll find out in episode 11 and 12.
yeah. And also going back on that, episode 10 really answered a lot of questions that we had earlier because we were wondering one, how exactly Dreadnought like knew how to get on the ship and why he attacked specifically the protostar. And I also wondered why the diviner had so much information on the protostar. And thinking back on it, now that I think about it, since the diviner is from 50 years in the future, the they probably had this information on the Federation from
Mm.
he got that information from his home planet. So he already knew how to operate their systems. especially since the Federation had so much influence on the Diviner's home planet to begin with. He probably got all of this information from his home planet, then went back into the past and used Dreadnought, either got him from the future or befriended him and his entire like robot race kind of, and then got them to agree to take over the protostar from the inside out, which is why he attacked it, causing them to crash land somewhere on Tars Lamora, which caused the whole mining process. That's just my theory on what happened and how the Diviner first got like contact with the protostar and why he knew it was on Tars Lamora.
Mm.
That or the case with Dreadnought attacking the ship is just unconnected, but then the Diviner ended up befriending or joining up with Dreadnought.
Well, we also know that the diviner is on like what I'm going to call life support
Yeah,
because there's this tube that's connected to him that helps, I think, give him nutrients.
yeah,
And so the moment that Janeway disconnected that, he seems so frail, so old, so like he could collapse at any moment, so weak. And
yeah,
so between that and the fact that they're in another scene, he seemed to like be at wit's end and not know how to proceed to the point in which he was debating with Dreadnought whether to create a clone of himself.
yeah,
And so it was like the clone, in this case, Gwen, is his backup, his plan B
yeah,
to complete this mission to like I think save his planet ahead of time to I guess destroy the Federation so that his planet doesn't go to war
yeah.
with itself.
Basically to carry on his will in case anything happened to him. And that must mean when he first got sent back into the past, he was either middle-aged for his race or already pretty old, considering that they sent him back with life support, or he ended up finding some sort of way to get this life support. Because if he's trying to stop the Federation now, that must mean that they're eventually going to go to his home planet relatively soon, especially since he seems incredibly old as he is. I don't think they would specifically send an old man back 50 years into the future or into the past, sorry, to stop something that would happen 50 years from then. So he probably has been in the past already for years and years and years. And he seems incredibly adamant on getting the Protostar, not just because he needs it, but also probably because he started this whole mining colony and he's probably been in charge of it for decades at this point.
Yeah.
So that also has something to do with the life support as well, most likely.
But did you notice that the moment he created the clone, it immediately looked like the Gwen that we know now? Like it wasn't a baby?
Yeah, it just sort of grew into yeah, whatever Gwen is. It just kind of grew into her form almost.
Right. Like a
And like
teenager,
fell.
but it wasn't a toddler, a baby. So that's interesting. So maybe time is just different. I was also wondering if maybe sometime when he was traveling to the past, he got injured, or if like that is a process that significantly ages you.
Yeah.
I
Maybe the cloning process is what does that. Because
right.
it is sort of a part of him, so maybe him making another clone drained his whole lifespan.
Even further
Yeah,
because that's one of the reasons why he made the clone.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Yeah. So many like questions.
Yeah,
I do want to talk about a few more things, and that's one of those items. The fact that they're all wearing the Starfleet uniform, so they're like a unified front now. And once they return back to the planet, we notice that um, the miners are able to now communicate with each other because of the comm badges, and the universal translator was able to help them, and Dow was able to work out a way to use the universal translator connected to like the ankle bracelets, the ankle monitors to help everyone on the planet communicate with each other. Everyone that's, I guess, trapped there. A particular character steps up and seems to help lead the way. And that was Caitlin, like that cat character that we saw early on in episodes 1 and 2. And it was nice for that story to come full circle, even in the mid-season, not even wait until the very end. And she said, "We have a voice, good for us, bad for you," and that resonated with me because I felt like with their voice, they felt like they had power, and they're now able to take control of and communicate with each other, not only good things that's going on, like two of the characters were able to find a bond, but also communicate a strategy for how to escape and maneuver.
The same character that we first see Dreadnought and the Diviner oppress is now the one leading an entire force to fight against Dreadnought. It was very interesting seeing that, especially this like small, like
Yeah.
little cat girl was like probably like 4 or 5 years old. Well, I wouldn't say that young, but this very young person leading this entire legion of grown men, basically.
And she had such hopeful eyes
Yeah.
when she looked up and she saw this ship, and yeah, so that was pretty cool. It's also nice to see that Dal's plan worked, and there was a level of planning, and then there was some aspects that he didn't plan for, but they had to improvise, and that worked out as well.
Yeah. Um, I think this is the first plan that Dow's made since the first pilot episodes, at least, that has actually gone like with no issues or with very little issues, at least.
Yes, because he worked with the rest of the team,
Yeah.
and they learned to
Yeah.
use the technology, uh, and listen to Janeway, listen to each other.
Yeah. It definitely showed his character growth throughout the last 10 episodes. There you go.
Yeah. Um, so along the way, I also feel as though the writers have been introducing lots of technology, and like each episode focused on a different technology. I felt like we were gradually introduced to phasers, and then the holodeck, and then transporters, and earlier on translators. So it's nice that all of that built upon itself to this bigger climax. And the technology within the protostar, and the protostar had a protostar. If you- so
Yeah.
the
It was
protostar is the
interesting to
ship
see.
and the core.
Yeah. It was interesting to see that the technology in Star Trek has gotten so advanced or is already so advanced to the point where it can contain an actual star. Although I guess it must not be that hard if Murph can also just eat a star somehow. So it takes a very durable material to contain stars, but apparently it's doable.
Right. Yes, because up until episode 10, my biggest shock was finding out that the diviner chose the ship over his clone, over Gwen. But then maybe, and then I started to analyze it myself, maybe because he thought that he could replace Gwen because it's just his clone and stuff like that. But then in episode 10, when Fugitive Zero used all its power to basically make a zombie out of the diviner, I was like, oh my goodness, this whole time he had this talent and this power.
Yeah.
And held it like, woo, wow. That's
I
crazy.
mean, that just shows that Fugitive Zero really values the crew that they're in, because at any point in time they could have done that and gotten rid of their enemies,
Yes.
but they how would they know that any of their crew members wouldn't have just looked at them as well? So even though even though they did have this ability, it was probably better that they waited until they were really, really in trouble, like they really had to save them, before revealing their true form. Because at any point in time, they could have accidentally made any of the crew members go insane. Then that would have just defeated the whole purpose of, them banding together.
Right. And then it takes me back to the first episode. And this is the reason why the diviner and and basically everybody was looking for Fugitive Zero
Yeah.
because of the amount of power that's there in that device. There's like there's just a smaller protostar that's there.
Yeah. At some point in time, Fugitive Zero was in captivity. It makes you wonder why the diviner still wanted to find the protostar if they already had someone as powerful as Fugitive Zero in their captivity.
And we know that in this time period, whatever they were mining for is valuable because that's what the Ferengi
Yeah.
was also after.
Didn't really understand how the whole Fugitive Zero's true form thing worked, because how come when Fugitive Zero removes that like casing, that robot casing that it has, it just it like everybody who sees it goes insane. And yet, and you can look at it through a reflection and still go insane for a little bit at least, or still have some sort of mental damage for a little bit, or at least lose memories. But then you can look at Fugitive Zero through that window that's on it and it's perfectly fine. That I didn't really understand how that worked. Because it's not like a different type of glass. It's just one is a reflection and one you're looking through a piece of glass. So maybe as long as you don't see its entire form, then it's fine. But even Fugitive Zero is still just condensed in that little ball.
Well, maybe it's some sort of special glass. Like there's material that reduces radioactivity. Like maybe it's some sort of like
Something.
what this far into the future is 100 pane glass that has spectrum reflectors and reduces it must
Yeah. It has to be something special. But
right.
normal glass, they you would still go insane, I feel.
Yes. And hopefully they'll share that the science behind it later.
Yeah.
They're covering so much space. I can't say so much ground, so much space in this series, and it's definitely fun. I think from here, there's going to be some way we're going to learn more about Sloan and the Federation and what's going to be in store for them. Oh my goodness, because they could be implementing the trap that the diviner set this whole time.
Yeah.
And hopefully we find out more about Shakode. And looks like we're gonna meet Vice
Yeah.
Admiral Janeway for
Yeah.
real, like in real life, not just the hologram.
And she might try to fight or something. She might try to fight the crew of the Protostar.
I am so enjoying this series. It at first I was thinking it was geared towards kids, but
Yeah.
then I started to think more about it once I learned more about like the kid slave trade and stuff like that. I was like, "Ooh, there's mature themes." But if you peel back like the onion in this, peel back the layers of this onion, there's some interesting layers within that, within each of these characters in each episode and storyline that keeps compounding on each other, and it's this is just a lot of fun.
I cannot wait to see how the real Janeway and hologram Janeway react to each other. Cause I don't know, maybe Janeway, like the hologram one, was implemented at some point in time after the ship was no, because the ship was presumably taken after Dreadnought attacked the original crew. So we'll see. We'll see. We don't know. We still don't really know if that Janeway that was on the ship during that attack was the actual Janeway or was the hologram Janeway. But it seems like it was the hologram one,
Yes.
meaning the real Janeway maybe was a captain of it before the previous captain that got attacked because she still like knew about the ship, still knew about the proto warping and everything. So we'll see how they interact. We'll see that nice little fun joke that's probably gonna come from that at some point in time.
I hope Admiral Janeway has a secret code to easily shut down hologram Janeway, because you can't allow your AI to like be in your same presence or to override you. like like you can't have the training program can't train the admiral like this. So
Yeah,
she should be able in
yeah,
some way to just shut it down and like, okay, the real thing is here. We don't
yeah.
need this this imaginary training
I feel
device
like Dow's
anymore.
gonna make a joke on how the real Janeway looks older than the hologram version of Janeway as well. He's definitely gonna mention that.
Like, oh, now you're really going to be in trouble if you got a. You just brought in the principal to the.
Yeah, because that one has gray hair on the sides and everything. So,
Yeah, and the
oh my
suit, the
gosh,
uniform is much more strong shoulders.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for joining me in this adventure and talking about Prodigy.
yeah.
We will next discuss episodes 11 through 20 in about 2 weeks' time. So check us out then. And until then, though, live
Live long
long and
and
prosper.
prosper.